I want to take a moment to speak directly to you, the one who prayed with everything in your heart and still didn't receive the answer you were hoping for. The one who believed so deeply, so sincerely, that things would turn out differently. The one who asked God for something that truly mattered and it didn't happen. Maybe you prayed for healing. Maybe you prayed for a breakthrough. Maybe you prayed for someone you love not to die, and yet they're gone. And now you're sitting with a question that feels heavier than anything else. Is God even real? I won't pretend that question isn't valid. I won't dismiss it or try to silence it with cliches. Because the truth is, when you've poured your heart into prayer, when you've believed with everything in you, and things still fall apart, it hurts in a way that words can barely hold. It can feel like betrayal, like silence, like abandonment. You might feel angry, confused, numb, maybe even guilty for questioning. Or maybe you've already stopped believing entirely because it just doesn't make sense anymore. And honestly, I understand. Not in a surface level way, not in a I've read about this kind of way, but in a real, personal way. Because I prayed too. I've prayed for something that meant so much to me. I believed, I trusted, I held on to hope even when things looked impossible. I spoke words of faith. I waited. I expected an answer. And that answer never came. Not the way I wanted, not the way I needed. There were moments I sat in silence, wondering if anyone was listening at all, wondering if my words were just disappearing into empty space, wondering if I'd been talking to myself this whole time. So when you feel like giving up on God, I get it. But here's what I want to say to you, not as someone who has it all figured out, but as someone still walking through faith even with unanswered prayers. God still exists, even here, even in the silence. Even in the outcome you didn't want. Even the loss that feels unbearable. I know that might be hard to accept right now. It might even feel frustrating to hear. Because if God exists, then why didn't he answer? Why didn't he step in? Why didn't he stop the pain? Those are real questions. Deep questions. And I won't pretend to have perfect answers for them. But I do know this. An unanswered prayer is not proof of God's absence. Sometimes we think faith guarantees a specific outcome. That if we believe enough, pray enough, hope enough, things will go exactly the way we ask. But faith isn't a transaction. It's not a formula where we input belief and receive guaranteed results. Faith is something much harder and much deeper. It's choosing to believe even when you don't understand. It's holding on to something bigger than yourself when everything inside you is telling you to let go. It's standing in the middle of pain and still whispering, God, I don't get this, but I'm not walking away. And I know, that's not easy, especially when loss is involved. If you prayed for someone not to die, and they did, that kind of pain cuts deeper than words can describe. It doesn't just hurt, it shakes your entire foundation. It challenges everything you thought you knew about God, about prayer, about life itself. You might feel like your faith failed, or worse, you might feel like God failed you. But please hear this gently. Your prayer was not ignored. Your faith was not wasted. Your love for that person mattered, more than you can imagine. And their life mattered too. Death is one of the hardest realities we face. It feels final. It feels cruel. It feels like it takes everything from us. But it does not mean God wasn't there. Sometimes, God's presence doesn't look like prevention. Sometimes it looks like strength in the middle of breaking. Sometimes it looks like quiet comfort when everything else is loud with pain. And I know, that's not the answer you wanted. You wanted them to live. You wanted things to be different. You wanted your prayer to change the outcome. That longing, that hope, that desperation, that's real love. And God sees that. Even if you don't feel him right now. Even if you're angry at him. Even if you've walked away. He's not distant from your pain. He's not offended by your questions. He's not waiting for you to get it together before you come back. He understands grief. He understands loss. He understands what it feels like to hurt. And even when it feels like silence, doesn't mean absence. I'm not here to force belief on you. I'm not here to argue or convince you with perfect words. I'm just here to remind you, gently, that your story with God doesn't have to end here. Even if your faith feels shattered right now, shattered faith is still faith. Even if all you have left is a tiny question instead of strong belief, that question can still be the beginning of something. You don't have to have everything figured out to keep going. You don't have to pretend you're okay. You don't have to ignore your pain to believe again. You're allowed to grieve. You're allowed to question. You're allowed to feel everything you're feeling. And still, God can be there. Not in the way you expected. Not in the way you hoped. But still there. And I want to say something else too. Something personal. I'm still waiting on answers. There are prayers I've prayed that are still hanging in the air. There are things I've asked for that haven't happened. There are moments where I've wondered, why not me? Why not now? And yet, I still believe. Not because everything makes sense. Not because I've seen every answer. But because somewhere along the way, even in the silence, I've felt something that I can't ignore. A quiet reassurance. A strength I didn't create. A presence that doesn't always speak, but doesn't leave either. So I'm holding on. And I want to encourage you. You don't have to rush back into belief overnight. But maybe, just maybe, don't close the door completely. Leave a little space for the possibility that God is still there, even if you don't understand how. And if you're reading this right now, I want you to know something else. You're not alone. There are so many people carrying unanswered prayers. So many people trying to make sense of loss. So many people quietly struggling with the same questions you're asking. And that's actually why I'm writing this. This message is something I'm dedicating from the heart because of a comment I received. A comment that reminded me how many people are hurting, how many people feel like they've lost not just something important, but their faith too. So this isn't just for one person. It's for anyone who has ever prayed and felt unheard. Anyone who has ever believed and felt disappointed. Anyone who's trying to hold on or has already let go. If that's you, I see you. And more importantly, God sees you. Even now, even here, even in this moment. And if you feel like you don't have the strength to pray anymore, that's okay. Sometimes, just being honest about your pain is enough. Sometimes, even silence is a form of reaching out. And if you want, if you're open to it, I'd love for you to drop your prayer request in the comments. Not because I have all the answers, not because I can promise outcomes, but because there is something powerful about not carrying things alone. We can stand together. We can hope together. We can believe, even if it's just a little at a time. So whatever you're going through, whatever you've lost, whatever you're still waiting for, you're not forgotten. Your prayers still matter. And your story isn't over. Not here. Not now. Hold on. Even if it's just by a thread. Because sometimes, even a thread is enough to begin again.